Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be answering a question that Kent over at the Real Geek asked, which was, can you do a comparison between Debian Testing, also OpenSuSe Tumbleweed, and Arch Linux to see which one is the more secure and which one is the more stable? And so that's what we're going to attempt to address today. So stay tuned right after this. All right, so we're going to jump into this, and yes, we are going to test the all of these things. So yeah. So the first thing I always like to start out with is a quote. So if debugging is the process of removing bugs, then programming must be the process of putting them in. And that's Ed Scrutice said that. It's true. Funny, but it's true. The other one is so if we're going to look at stability and we're going to look at security, we need to define those because there are, especially with stability, there's some ambiguity in how those are defined, and there's overlap between different definitions depending upon what the heck it is you're talking about. So let's start with the first definition that I've seen for stability. So there are definitions which basically determine if software will run under stress. So you might call this stress testing, but really it's pushing conditions into the software that might vary its output. For example, you might increase its temperature. You might increase its voltage, that sort of thing. So, and you're trying to see not that the program works correctly, but to see if it'll crash. If I hit a certain point, does it just go down? If you're doing gaming on PCs and you're interested in reclocking your machine upwards, overclocking it, you probably go through some of this. You probably have to stand it up and run it for a while and see if that game stays up with your new CPU frequencies and voltages to see if it's stable or not. So that would be sort of like that, and really that encompasses the second definition too. This one is you run for the software for an interval of time, not that you're varying anything, but you're just trying to see if it stays up for that interval of time, whatever that is, an hour, overnight, couple of days, whatever it might be. There's some other things that come up here in testing, so you may find that you have memory leaks, you may have race conditions, you may have data that is bad, that's causing the application to crash. So yeah, all of that is designed to look for that kind of stability. Because, you should be handling air data, not blowing up the program, right? Yeah, never, as they say, never check for an air condition you can't handle. So the other one is, this is an interesting one. This is trying to attempt to define it in terms of hardware. Mean time between failures, mean time to failure, mean time to repair. You can't really use that to gauge software. And there's still people that managers, they still are people that insist on doing this, but it's dumb because software doesn't fail the same way hardware does. It can be the worst case. The worst case is it fails intermittently, and it's data driven usually. There's all kinds of if then branches that are in code. So I've seen code run fine for a year, hit a branch for the first time and crash, and then people are like, wait, this has been running for a year. How come it crashed? So yeah, and those ideas for mean time between failures, that probably came from hardware engineers that were trying to impose their standards on software engineers. But of course, that ambiguity is still around as stability testing. So, so how do you confuse a hardware engineer? Ask them to count to 10 without taking their shoes off. There's a corollary. They have one for us too. So yeah, and theirs is not quite as nice. So anyway, so what are we talking about here? What is Debian talking about? When they define something as being stable, I've seen all kinds of people interpret this, and it seems to be that they read the Wikipedia, they see that there's ambiguities that have to do with the stability of the software. Actually, it has nothing to do with it. As far as Debian, and by the way, RedHat too, as far as the stability, it's the stability of the interfaces in the system. So that includes both programming and user interfaces. And so you're trying to determine, are those interfaces changing over time? And you don't want to allow that in a stable release because that can cause program failures. So Red Hat has a way more concise definition, but they actually go through, by the way, they also subscribe to the stability model too. But they actually have a very formal process that they go through, and they actually have a PDF document that goes on for days that actually goes through this definition. Debian also, they cover the same kinds of things. They talk about the stability of the application's program interface and the application's binary interface. So what the heck is all that? So those are APIs are interactions between software and software. ABIs are interactions between software and hardware. There is all kinds of ABIs. Intel has standards, ISBI or something like that they call it. But they're all standards that you have to adhere to in order to communicate to the hardware. So anyway, let's talk about the application program interface first. So what is that? So APIs are determined at compile time. That is, I have to get agreement with whatever application I'm talking to that there is either a published applications program interface that says, this is how you send me data, and this is how I send you the result back. So, for example, let's say I write a calculator and I'm trying to call it, and I want to pass it. I want you to add, and then I'm going to give you two numbers that I want you to add together, and I want you to give me the result back. So I could change it to a multiply, a divide, a subtract, but that API defines what that other application is going to do. If that changes, then one of the applications is probably going to get confused and not know what to do with it, especially if I'm shuffling, variables around and they're not in the same positions as they were when we originally reached an agreement. I've seen that a lot. So Debian says just about the same thing, and so that's what they're talking about too, is preserving to make sure that that application program interface doesn't change between when you're in a release like 11 or 10, that API and ABI isn't going to be modified on you. There's the other part of it is so how far does that go? All right. So Debian says that if I build an application on, say, 11.3, which is the most current as the time I'm doing this video, will that code run on Debian 11.0, the original release that came out, a year and a half ago or so? And the answer is yes, because those application interfaces don't change when it goes up from 11.0 to 11.1, 2, and 3. They stay the same. There's no modification there, and Debian and Red Hat guarantee it. So, but does that mean that my code, I can push it down into Debian 10? Not necessarily, because there is no guarantee there because you're switching repositories. So yeah, Debian 10 repositories are different than Debian 11. So yeah, and so you cannot guarantee that the ABIs and APIs have not changed. Stability, so this gets really easy for Debian testing. Debian testing is a future Debian stable. So all it is it's a collection of packages that are going in and being assembled to go into a future release of Debian. In the case right now, at the time, again, that I'm doing this video, it's Bookworm, which is the code name for Debian 12. So can you assume that if I mix 11 with the testing releases that it will work, that the APIs and ABIs will work? No, you can't. So by definition, Debian testing is not stable for Debian 11. It's also not stable for Debian 12 because testing allows new packages to be inserted. So yeah, and that's the other problem you have with Debian testing. So is that a rolling release? No, it just means it's active. If you want to see a full rundown on all the repositories, you'll find this diagram that's out in the Debian wiki, and you can go through it. But basically from the top down, you have red boxes, which is development, yellow, which is your testing phase, and green, which is your production. So all of the repos that have to do with production are in green, like security, stable updates, stable backports, and so forth. The red ones like unstable. That's actually one they call SID. So SID is if there's anybody that wants to submit a package or they've got something that's brand new, they just throw it in SID, and that's where it sits until somebody can grab it and then pull it over to testing and start working on it. If they think that that's one that they want to include in a future release of Debian. Usually it is. Also, any security updates that come through the system come through that way, but security updates are kind of special. So we also want to get them out to production just as soon as possible, right? So we don't want to wait for it to go through a testing phase. We want if this is a critical thing, we want to be able to get it out there right now. So it will go to security, security goes to proposed updates, and proposed goes into stable updates, and that gets pushed into the stable release over time. So security updates flow straight in. I've heard so many people say, "Oh well, Debian doesn't ever get the security updates." No, it does. And then I've heard people say, "Oh, it takes days, it takes weeks, it takes time to get it through." No, if it's a critical, it will go through immediately. If it is a non-critical patch, it might go through testing in order to do some more formal testing on it to make sure we're not inserting a bug into our production environment, which would be a disaster, right? We don't want that. So and then you have experimental. So what is experimental for? Up in the red box next to unstable. If it's found that this particular package is having issues, it's breaking, it's not running right, given the wrong data, I don't know, half a different things that it could be. It doesn't get put in unstable. Unstable doesn't mean that this is a collection of broken packages. No, the broken packages get stuck in experimental, or they're sort of, we'll work on these when we get time. They're not critical to what we're trying to do, but we'll just throw them in there and we'll work on them as we get time and fix them, and then and the maintainer can then decide what they want to do with them. There's a number of things they might decide to do with it. Nothing could be an option. They might pull it back and then get it fixed, and then it'll flow through the unstable side, or it may get inserted into backports. Backports that's how you get changes to packages into a production release. Rather than sending new packages into the stable version, because again, you could disrupt an API or an ABI, they go through backports, and backports makes whatever change that new package had in it so that it can be applied to the old version of the code. So you still get the new feature, but it still carries the old version over, right? Does that make sense? Provided it doesn't alter the API or ABI. So yeah, we don't want that. One of the ones I left off here. So just to summarize, unstable is SID. Experimental is where packages go that have issues and problems. Stable is the production release. Testing is the next stable release of Debian. One of the things you'll find out with testing, if you're running on testing for any length of time, as they get closer to a release, so as a new release is coming up, they will freeze that repository. The Debian devs will freeze it and allow no more changes to the testing so that they can finalize everything, get it packaged up and ready to go to become, in this case, Debian 12. So yeah, and you'll find that happens where there'll just be this, I don't know, a week or two maybe sometimes. Depends on what they find. But yeah, I mean, that could happen. So there's other repos, but those aren't really going to be part of our discussion today. There's a rule that Debian has. Again, I've heard people, there's all kinds of advice on the internet. If you listen for a while, you get all kinds of great advice, most of it wrong. So here's the thing. Never, ever mix packages between stable, unstable, or testing. That is not my rule. That comes from Debian. And so, yeah, if you want newer software, get it from backports. But don't mix your repos on the same system. Don't do that. If you're going to do testing, go to testing. So and take the backports and take the security updates out. You will still get security updates because remember there was a line that came down from the security, went into testing. You'll still get them. but it may take a little while for you to get it. So yeah, it just depends on how soon that they want to push it out to you. So failure to heed this rule means you'll end up with an unstable system. And I'm not talking about an API. I'm talking about application crashes at random. Yeah, not of the SID kind, but of the kind that will cause production issues for you. What about security? Well, what do we mean by a more secure system? Or is it is it even considered secure? That's a tough question to answer. And I have asked many security engineers over the years about, hey, can you tell me what it means to be secure? And they'll just kind of look at you for a minute, and they'll start stammering. It's like it's like that for a minute, and then their eyes will go to the floor. Their feet will start shuffling, like they would really like to just walk away from you, and their hands will start waving, and then they'll say something like, "Well, it's impossible." That's usually what they'll blurt out. You can't. So what do you do instead? Well, you can ask some questions and you can set up some policies. So there's some that are already defined for you and you can follow those. Like, here's some examples. This isn't all of them, by the way. Do you have user accounts that are using default passwords that came with your repo? Or no password? See that. Are you using shared passwords? Or two or more users have the same password? Is there strong authentication that's being defined, and is that centralized someplace like an LDAP or maybe Active Directory? Are you using that? The other ones are, do you need to restrict access to the system depending upon what the privileges are for that user? If you do, then how do you restrict it? How are you doing it? And is it sufficient to prevent users you don't want in access to it? And is it sufficient to allow users that you do want to give access to be able to get in and get the data? So can you continue? The other one, this is an interesting one. This came up a long time ago. I haven't heard this question asked too much anymore, but can you continue to operate even if you're under attack? So a DDoS attack. Will your system... Do you have a mechanism in place to allow continuous operations in the event that happens? Are your systems physically secure? I mean, can you walk into the building and just walk into the computer room and do what you want? Or like I remember a couple of times where in our facility, I saw visitors had visitor badges and I didn't see an employee badge with them. Our policy was that visitors were not allowed to walk the floor unescorted. So I would grab them and I would escort them back up to the lobby if I saw them. And yeah, in this case, it was kind of funny. They were actually testing to see if somebody would actually step up and say something to them. So you got to watch out. They do test once in a while. Backups. Do you have backups that are current? Do you know where they are? Do you know how to get to them? How are they applied? And then your security patches. Are they current on your systems? And again, how are that done? Do you employ pen testers, and how often? Do you do regulatory compliance testing? So, because if you leave a system sitting long enough, you'll have system engineers, you'll have software developers, you'll have system admins that will go in and make changes, and they're human. They'll forget to put it back when they're done because they got it to work, and they're so happy that they just want to get the heck out of there today and go home. So, yeah. So that happens. So are you checking for that? Are you checking for compliance to make sure the systems are still in the same locked out conditions that you want it to be? Also, there's 900 other questions like that. So this is just the start. You're not done. So when you are done, you end up with you have a risk assessment. You don't have a security. You can't check the box that says, hey, boss, this system is 100% secured. All you can do is say, based on the amount of money you're willing to spend, boss, this is where we're at as a percentage of where a system that met all the compliance standards would be, and here's where you're at, and if you want to get here, this is the cost it's going to be, and then that's really up to them. It's a business decision at that point whether or not they want to spend the money to continue to make the system more hardened. So, did I sufficiently lower your expectations? I hope so. But those are just some simple things you can do to get started. So the way I'm going to do the assessment today is I'm going to run Lynis. Lynis is a tool. If you've seen my videos on distribution reviews, you've noticed I've run it every time I've done it. 70 or below, 70 is considered passing, and this is rule of thumb. So you might find some people that say, well, it's okay if you have 65, and maybe it is, but most of the rule of thumbs that I have seen, 70 or below is failing. I mean, below 70 is failing. 70 and up is passing. So that's what we'll be comparing against. So we're going to do Debian testing, and this will be version 11, which means that the testing release will be 12. I know that was confusing, but it will be actually 12. OpenSuSe Tumbleweed, which is a rolling release. And then finally, Arch Linux, which is easy Linux. And by the way, rolling releases, by their very definition, allow new packages to be installed on your system. They also allow new kernels, unless you're running an LTS. They also allow new kernels to be installed. And that is the case, and you have no way of controlling that internally. In other words, I'm not collecting the repo and I am sorting through it to find new packages that are coming inbound. Arch and Tumbleweed can never be stable as defined by Red Hat and Debian because they do not protect the APIs and ABIs. There's no way you can protect that if you have new packages rolling into the system. So let's stop here, and I'm going to go set up my system, and let's see where we're at. I have Debian up here, and you can see that it is bookworm /SID, and that would be 12, of course, and you can see that is definitely a newer kernel than what you'll find on Debian 11. Debian 11 is 5.10, excuse me. And then we'll go over here. And it's interesting that all these are about the same versions. This is 18.0, this is 18.2. And then down here on Arch is this one. And I wanted to stop before I forget. Esnix, who has a YouTube channel, and I'll put his link in my description as well. He has done an amazing job of setting up an installer for Arch. I think it's based on Calamari's, and I was blown away by how easy and how simple it was. Esnix, great job. Great job. I enjoyed using that. It was amazing. So I am in the directories here, and I want to run this, which is the Lynis audit. And then I want to do the same thing over here. That may fail. I think my finger slipped off the keyboard, which it does a lot on this one. So right now I'm gathering an assessment of the system. Debian is done. I'm waiting on the other two now. This one takes a while to get through all the ports and packages, but eventually we'll get there. I'm just going to scroll up here without looking at the score just yet. I want to see what the warnings are. No warnings here. I have two, actually. I have two warnings. Let's see what we got here. Just one. Just one. Okay, so this one I caused. I caused that one. And I don't have this set up. I'm running minimal and on Debian, so I don't have this set up. So my fault. Normally that would not be an issue, but this one would be because you're supposed to remove the security repositories to run testing. So, which is what I did. Now that's not me. That's what Debian says. All right, so we have. Let's just see how we do here. So these are missing firewalls, both of these. That's fairly common. And then we have expiration dates for our passwords. We have USB modules and FireWire modules that are installed. We need to have a DNS configuration for the domain name, which I don't have, of course. These need to be, either whitelisted or thrown out or denied. And then I have a number of problems with my configuration with SSH. A banner, some deleted files are present, and restricting file permissions. Let's take a look at this one. One thing I noticed that wasn't in here, though, is this is not looking for a home directory on a separate partition or a var or a temp. But if I come through here, I just noticed it. I just started to see it, that this one is complaining about that. Let's see if this one is too. Yeah, this is also complaining about that as well. Lynis really prefers to have home, temp, and var on its own partition. And that's just to protect your root partition from filling up because your logs are full or something. So, or you have a user that's decided to write, just write a program that, how many bytes can I write before I fill up the file system? I've seen that kind of malicious behavior before. Process accounting issue. Those are all standard things. So we have a 65. This is Arch again. Tumbleweed. Let's see what we get for it. 69. And I suspect this one will be low. Because I would guess, I would have to go in and look, but I'm guessing that security issue, not having the security repos present, Lynis probably weights that a little higher. So, before I usually got about 64 to 66 on Debian stable, and you can see it's dropped quite a bit. So, all of these, by the way, are failing in my rule of thumb. So it's just a matter of degrees. This is slightly failing. This is slightly more failing, and this is really failing. So I guess if you want to have a battle about security between the systems as to which one has failed the least, I guess you could do that. This one got most of its points because it already has, and we can check that. I know they use Btrfs, and so these are volumes where these partitions are mounted. So temp is on its own, tempfs. Home is on a Btrfs partition by itself. Var, same thing. So this one already is, it's set up. Now these won't be, because most of the defaults install everything under root, which that bugs Lynis a lot. So same one here. Now, to be truthful, this number was, when I ran it raw against Arch, and I don't know if this is an Esnix script or if it's a part of the Arch install, but there were a number of users, like root, for example, which had the ability to log into the system and no password was set. There was also a couple of them that needed to have groups associated. There was some groups like group check, grpck, goes out and checks to see if you have all the security groups set up, like wheel and video and audio and blah, blah, blah. So I had to get through that. And then Lynis discovered this was running on Arch, and so it wanted the Arch audit tool, which is the thing that tells you about what CVEs are out and are available. I think we can, let me see if I can find it. I think it's called Arch Audit. Yeah, Arch-Audit. And you can see that. There's tools like this for Debian, and I think there's tools for SUSE as well. But it'll tell you that, okay, so your grub is affected by multiple issues. And you can get info in this, and it'll actually give you the CVE. I've always been impressed with this. I think it's really cool that they add this in here. So I could put in recursive, so it'll go down through all of the dependent packages as well. And then let's see. What else did I give it? I can't remember. Oh, show. Okay, so it was RC. All right, let's do that. And there's the CVEs that are associated with a particular risk. So medium risk is fix as soon as you can, but it's not. It's probably means that the vulnerability is requiring access to the machine, physical access. Low is, yeah, fix it whenever you can, but it's not a big deal. These, however, are bad. High risks are fixed now. And that's why that pathway is in the development chain for Debian. So, and that is to fix those things. So, yeah. Anyway, that's all. Let's go back and talk about kind of where we are here. And so, conclusions. How did we do? Well, they all failed. So, as far as stability is concerned, none of them can be considered stable, not according to the definition of Debian and RedHat. That's my opinion. As far as the security, well, they all fail. So none of them are secure or equally insecure or close to it anyway. So there are risks and costs to a program of action. This was a quote by JFK. And he said, but there are far less than the long-range costs of comfortable inaction. So doing nothing could end up costing you more in the long term. And that is something that seems like we have to relearn about every other year with security and securing the systems. So is Lynis the be-all, end-all tool for securing your system? No, of course not. There are so many different things that in order to harden a system, bring it into compliance, make sure that it is as taut or as secure as it can be, given a given budget. Yeah, if you have an unlimited budget, which I would really find unlikely, yeah, you could probably secure it to the nines, but no business is gonna spend that kind of money. It's too big an effort. So you want to make sure that you're covering the ones that are important to you, because the one thing that it takes a long time for a business to build up a reputation as somebody that's trusted, and only a few seconds, just one of those breaches can completely destroy their credibility, and it will take them years and years to regain what they lost. So with that's all I'm going to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed this, and Kent, I hope this answered your question about the security in here, and with that, I'm gonna go off and do something else. Hope to see you all again soon. Please like and subscribe, and bye for now.